Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are in the world. I hope you're very well. You're listening to Autistic Voices. I'm Evelyn Charmer. I'm a paediatric therapist, and I'm the director of EdElf Child Therapy Limited and its sister training company for therapists, the Child Hypnotherapy Institute. And I've recently been diagnosed autistic myself. So I'm very inspired to bring you a diverse and rich range of autistic voices from the community. People who are diagnosed, people who are not diagnosed, people who work alongside and collaborate with autistic families or autistic adults, people who identify as neurodivergent. Please come and join the conversation. I'd love to hear from you. You can email me at Evelyn, that's EVALYNNE, at childhypnotherapyinstitute.com, or contact me via the show. Thank you for joining me with Autistic Voices. Hello, this week's Autistic Voices guest is a lady called Benna McCartney. So just want to say welcome to the podcast, Benna, and thanks for coming on.
Hi, Lynn. So good to be here. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. So Benna and I have known each other years and years and years ago. We met when our sons were of similar age in the same class at school, but that's a long time in the past because both of those little boys are now grown men and living in the world. But just for transparency, we've known each other a long time and we've kept in touch on social media. And what's really interesting and why I want to speak to you today on the podcast, Benna, is that neither of us knew back then when we were hanging out that we were neurodivergent, and we've both been late diagnosed adults in our 50s. So I just wanted to talk to you about your journey, because I find it really interesting that there's been a few people who I was really drawn to in my life as an adult, and became good friends with or just really liked, who have ended up finding out that they're neurodivergent, and so have I. So I find that fascinating.
Yes, me too, and similar for me.
Just let listeners know what your diagnosis is, first of all.
Yeah, sure. So I was diagnosed with high-functioning autism and complex PTSD. Basically, what it means is that you've had many traumas in your life, or I've had many traumas in my life, and so then it becomes complex because the traumas are very different. That's my understanding.
Yeah, and I thank you for explaining that. And just for listeners' benefit, Benna is calling in on a phone into the podcast, so there might be some technical issues if she drifts in and out sometimes, but we'll bear with. And she can explain why she's doing that a bit later. So I know that a lot of people on social media, there's a lot of debate around these labels of low functioning, high functioning, and all of that. So what does it mean in everyday life for you, high functioning?
I guess, the way I was going to describe it probably is just to say a bit more about my journey, because it might make more sense if I come at it from that level. So I really feel like I've always felt like I was sort of two different people, and I don't mean it in a sort of schizophrenic way. I just felt like I was always either one extreme or the other. And so I could be really conformative even as a child, and also really rebellious at the same time. So where the rebellion came out, and I see still comes out to a degree, is a major justice issue. So this could be in any situation in life. So for instance, I used to have they weren't friends at school. There used to be a couple of girls that were being bullied in my class. And to be perfectly honest, I couldn't stand them. I did not want to spend time with them. But other people were bullying them and saying nasty things about them. So I had this part of me that was so strong and like a real sort of, I guess, anger at how anybody could treat anybody badly in any shape or form. It just didn't make any sense to me. I couldn't get my head around it. I just couldn't bear it. It was just unbearable. So I would take these people under my wing and make friends with them. I would invite them into my home. I would play games with them. Even if I hated the games, I would just do it anyway, because I knew it was absolutely essential that I needed to do that. And also, my dad used to always say that I put my size 9s in it. I don't have size 9. Well, actually, I have size 8 feet, but 7 to 8. But no, he used to say, like, as a way of speaking, yeah, you've put your size 9s in it again. So I basically always say things like they were. And I always thought that was because I was from Liverpool. But apparently it's because I'm autistic, because I just say things as I see them. I don't necessarily have so much of a filter. And I remember really, really struggling in friendships, in relationships, sort of throughout my whole life in that regard, because I would say something that made perfect sense to me, and then somebody would get really offended, and I couldn't understand why they were. I literally was clueless as to why they were getting offended. And I think the other thing I really struggle with a neurotypical brain, in a way, is that sometimes it seems that people will not necessarily say what they're feeling, and will hide things and withhold things. And my brain cannot understand how that could even be a thing. So yeah, that's been quite a sort of issue in relationships. And then I also see when I'm really struggling with something, so I guess for me, high functioning is really like I'm so ridiculously capable. I'm capable. I do the most amazing things. I just am able to do so much. And then I crash. But when I crash, I really, really crash. So I can have kind of like, again, throughout my life has just been something where I guess the easiest way to explain it, I go from 0 to 100 really quickly. So if something's really freaking me out, I can't cope, and I will literally like start sort of screaming, shouting, like slamming doors. Like I literally turn into a small child where I just can't cope with the situation. But because I didn't know I was autistic, people throughout my life have just thought like she's got serious mental health issues, or she's got rage issues or anger issues. But it's never felt like that to me. It's always felt like I just literally suddenly cannot cope with the situation, and so just freak out, completely and utterly freak out.
I can really relate, because there are times where in my life that I felt cornered, where I just can't cope with something. And it might not be that I'm actually physically cornered, but I might feel like that. It feels like everything closing in, where I can just get really, it's like, it is like rage. And I guess if it's like that kid you see in the supermarket throwing themselves on the floor, slamming their fists and things, having a meltdown. So I guess that's what people mean when they say sort of autistic overload or autistic meltdown. And I think what you're describing is really common from other people I speak to on a regular basis who are autistic. Just as if your brain just explodes. You just cannot take anything,
Literally.
And it goes from 0 to 100 really quickly, and other people can then perceive that, as mental health issues, anger, rage, as you said. So thank you for bringing that up. I think that's brilliant. And I really like the way your dad talked about having no filters. You put your size 9s in. That's a very northern thing to say, but it makes a lot of sense. Because I do think, God, there's so much you've said there that I relate to, Benna. So it's really good to have this conversation, because it's not one we've ever had, even though we've always known each other. But I can so totally see this stuff now that I'm looking back on it with you. But the things about not being able to process or conceive of when someone's saying something and it doesn't marry with what they seem to be feeling. It's again, it overloads the brain. It just sort of short circuits, doesn't it?
Literally. Exactly how it feels.
Yeah. And I guess that's one of the reasons why I have been attracted to, now I know, other neurodivergent people, because you don't get that so much with neurodivergent people. You do get that kind of say what you mean, although we have learnt, haven't we, that there are social norms and there are things that are acceptable and not acceptable. And you have to sort of stop yourself sometimes from saying or doing something. You do learn that, I think. But I think in terms of just general, when you're feeling safe with someone and you're having a conversation with someone you'd feel you can be unfiltered and unmasked with, there's nothing better than that. But also the way that some of the things we say, or the way we say them, the way other people then receive them, especially neurotypical people, can cause conflict, can't it? And cognitive dissonance. And we go, oh, why was that received like that? And I don't understand. And is it me? Or is it, that's what I think people mean by social communication issues that autistic people can have. So thanks for explaining that. So What was your initial thoughts or your reaction to your diagnosis when you were diagnosed autistic specifically?
Yeah, so I mean, there was a bit of a build up to it. Yeah, basically, I didn't know then that I had really bad health anxiety, and my mum took her own life in 2004, and I still have a son who's now 22, as you said, same age as your son, and yeah, basically what happened is, because I then thought health anxiety, for people who don't know, is, in short, or a very simplistic way of describing it, is to feel as if you're going to die or everybody else is going to die around you, or there's something seriously wrong with you at all times, sort of thing. So I just had this pattern of behavior that, again, I didn't know why I had it, but it was really, really strong, and it obviously affected my son. So got to a point when over a year and a half ago, he spoke to me and he just said, I've really struggled with the fact that you've always thought you were going to die and I've always thought you were going to die. Really extreme, and must have been really, really difficult for him, and I totally understand. So he just said, I think you've got mental health issues, I think you need help. And so, because he's my only son and I absolutely adore him, I just thought, well, if he says I need help, then I definitely do. And I was very lucky to have health insurance privately through my business. So I went to see an amazing psychiatrist who basically diagnosed me in a few sessions, and he just asked me loads and loads of questions. And because I know there's a massive waiting list, isn't there? I think it's where I live near Brighton is about 7 years or something to be diagnosed at the moment, which is. But yeah, so he diagnosed me with autism, and then kind of said, I think it's highly functioning autism. And it's funny, actually, because I spoke to a friend the other day who said, yeah, I don't like that term, and that term shouldn't be used anymore. And so it seems like there's so many different terminologies that I haven't quite got my head around, because I feel like it wasn't that long ago that I had my diagnosis, so I'm still getting my head around all of that. But yeah, so when he told me, it was a real shock. But there was also a level of relief, I guess, because I suddenly realized that actually, where I thought there's just something seriously wrong with me all my life, like I'm broken, I've always felt like I'm just completely broken. And suddenly I felt that I wasn't broken anymore. There was something that actually had a name that I was being diagnosed with, and I knew nothing about. I actually had absolutely no idea. And I feel like I'm a really intuitive person. I'm very spiritual. You know, if anybody was going to know if there was anything, going on with me, it was me. And when he told me, it was such a shock that I actually couldn't get my head around it at all. And I literally knew nothing about it, apart from the stereotypical kind of like, man looking at train times or that sort of thing. I had absolutely no idea. So I had to go away. He gave me a book and I had to go away and read the book to even know what autism was. But as soon as I read the book, I was making notes by the side of the book, and I went back to my next session with him and just went, oh my God, I can't believe how this relates to me in my life growing up on so many different levels, and how I am as a person. And so everything just suddenly started making quite a lot of sense, which was quite amazing. But then I also had a complete downside of being completely devastated, because where I thought I was broken, I thought maybe I can be fixed if I'm broken on some hopeful level throughout my entire life. And I've been in therapy all my life and that sort of thing. And then suddenly, I was being given this diagnosis, and I just thought, oh, this is an actual thing, and I can't do anything about it. So I really went up and down with my diagnosis for quite some period of time. But I feel like it's kind of leveled out now a little bit more, which has really, really helped. And it's just really helped support me in ways that I'm able to do things differently, or I'm learning about how to do things differently that in a way that support me. So there's an autism charity called Assert in Brighton, and I feel so lucky to have been enrolled on a course that they did recently, and it literally told me everything about autism that I didn't know, and it also gave us lots of tools to use in daily life. And I feel very strongly that so many people who've been diagnosed with autism, it would be so helpful for them to go on some sort of course. I think the same sort of course is done nationally, but I can't tell you how helpful that was, just to put things into perspective, to speak to other people, because I do, funnily enough, like you said before, I'm starting to realize that I'm surrounded by a lot of neurodiverse people, but I didn't know they were, and they haven't had diagnosis. But it's been really interesting to have chats with them and them go, oh my God, that's me. Oh my God, that's me. So yeah, that's been a really interesting journey too. But I just think any sort of support is just invaluable, personally.
what I want to pick up on from what you talked about there, which I think a lot of people listening will really resonate with, whatever their age and whatever stage of diagnosis they're at, is this idea that if you feel that there's something wrong and you're broken, that there's the idea that, well, maybe something can, if I find the right thing or do the right things, I can be fixed. And I work with a lot of young people who are, I don't know, sort of that age where you're starting to really go on that path of self-discovery and self-awareness. So teenage years, secondary school age, going to college or higher education, or into sort of volunteering or work placements, things like that, getting out into the world and realizing that they are living with this, that it's a condition they live with and it can't be fixed. They're not broken, it can't be fixed. And some people, a lot of people that I work with, really struggle with that. So I'm really glad you brought that up, because I think it's a really honest and very gritty, real feeling that people deal with. And it can happen at any stage. These are people I'm talking about who have been diagnosed from very, very young, but at different points in your life where it can be something that you just want to be like everyone else. You want to be like it. The majority of people are neurotypical, as far as we know. There's about 1 in 100 that they know of now who have some sort of neurodiversity. So, 99% of people are not like you, are not like me. And, that can cause a sense of detachment or not belonging, or issues with your own self-esteem and identity that are really difficult. I think that's quite a lot of the stuff that I work with as a therapist, is helping people to get in touch with their authenticity and acceptance and self-love, hopefully, eventually, and be able to see themselves in a more positive light. Let's go back to what you said about, so you lost your mum to suicide, which is a massive trauma and probably a huge part of your complex PTSD, I imagine. So I'm not going to get into that story because I'm sure it's not where you want to go today. But what I wanted to pick up on is that you talked about developing health anxiety, and not surprising considering, how old were you when your mum died?
So I was early 30s, but also my first love died in the my early 20s.
Oh wow! So
I think it was just a knock on of both of those. Yeah.
Compound trauma. So it's not surprising, but also as an autistic person looking at it through that lens now, often what can happen, and I don't like to generalize because autism is a spectrum, but again, I'm generalizing from what my experience of what people have told me over the years as a therapist, is that when something really traumatic has happened, the autistic black and white brain can go into, well, that's what happens. That's what happens to people you love. So therefore, that can then feed into that anxiety it's likely to happen again. It just, because we've got such a logical, rational way that we think is, well, if that's what happens to my mum and that's what's happened to my partner, that's what's going to happen when I love people.
Absolutely. And you're absolutely right. It literally is as cut and dry as that. I don't think we realise necessarily when that's happening, because it doesn't feel cut and dry necessarily, because there's so many different elements, aspects of it. But yeah, that's exactly what happens. And it's the extremity of that. I was going to talk about sort of special interest earlier, and apparently they're called now, aren't they? It's a similar sort of hyper focus. It's a similar sort of thing on, and this is why health anxiety has been so bad for me, because it's just a hyper focus on that. As soon as I hyper focus on something, I can't stop thinking about it. I have to, that is my whole life. I can't even see a way out of not thinking about it. Yeah, absolutely agree.
Yeah, and I work with so many autistic people on a daily basis who experience this in many, many different ways, Benna. So, for example, someone who's had a bad experience of school or education or response to their needs and their presentation in school can then think that that's the way the world's going to respond to them for the rest of their lives. And it's very black and white thinking. And I'm simplifying massively. If there's psychiatrists listening, they'll be like, oh no, but there's a lot more to it than that's more complex. I'm sure it is. I'm not a neuroscientist. Wish I was. But the way I see it, in my autistic, very simplifying rational brain is you've had this experience that goes into your neurotransmitters, as that's what happens linked to those types of experiences. You believe that's always going to happen, and it's really hard to rewire that, or unwire it. And it's impossible with something as massive as what you're talking about as well, having lost two people.
Absolutely. And I think one of the other issues for me personally, but I can imagine this is many other people as well, is that if there's something that's happened that is maybe to do with relationship, so yeah, if I lost my mum and I lost my first love, then I'm going to lose people, but I'm going to lose people I love in relationship. I remember when my parents got divorced and my mum left, and she got first, before she actually left, she got taken down the path in a straitjacket, and we went to visit her in the mental health unit. I actually now honestly 100% feel that my mum had autism. But yeah, I just remember there's a link with, if you love someone, they leave, and then if you love someone, they die. So I think any sort of situations that have a connection to, if it's relationships in this particular instance, that really has a massive impact as well. So if you're thinking black and white, it's just another thing that compounds that thing that you thought happened already. It's like there's another thing that also happens. Not only do they leave, but they die. Do you know what I mean? So it's, that black and white thinking can really get in the way there, because it just really makes it so solid.
We'll find the evidence that fits the story. And yes. I don't know if you've come across this, but something else that can be common in autistic people is something called RSD, rejection sensitivity dysphoria. So it's a heightened sense of being abandoned, being rejected, and all of that. So if you've got any sort of traits of that going on as well in your profile, as they call it, that's going to compound that as well. So it starts to make a lot of sense when you put the pieces of the jigsaw together. I remember when our children were really young, and you were so health conscious and so made sure that everything that you fed your child was really healthy. You really read all the labels, you prepared your food yourself. You were really, really, fit, healthy, always been into exercise and stuff like that. And now looking back with this new autistic lens on that and the complex trauma lens, it makes complete sense to me. I don't think I even thought about it back then, but now looking at it, with this new information we've got about ourselves, it makes complete sense.
Absolutely. I mean, I even remember when I was pregnant, I got all the books. I did absolutely everything that I could to do it right. It had to be, again, just a massive hyper focus on everything, the way that it needs to be for the best for my child and the best for myself. Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, and I've witnessed you hyper focus on everything, and I think you've seen me do the same. It's probably why we're quite successful when we're in a work environment, because we will absolutely hyper focus on that. Let's move on to thank you for sharing so openly as well. Really appreciate it. I'm sure there are people out there who are really moved and touched by your story. But let's talk about some positive experiences, because I also know that you're an amazing musician and singer-songwriter and a very creative person. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, thank you. So, yeah, I really, really see that as a massive positive side of my autism, only because I'm just so motivated. I've just been always so motivated. And I think this is, again, where a positive element comes in, going back. Every single therapist, or most therapists that I've seen, and I've seen so many, literally all my life, have said, like, how have you not jumped off a cliff? How are you still here? And I think there's some element of the autism that's enabled me, again, as you say, black and white thinking, to just somehow decompartmentalize, or somehow have, like, I remember my mum actually saying to me, you have an inner strength that I don't have. And I think there's something in that, because very often I do question myself, and it's not that I don't get really down sometimes and completely lose the plot regularly, but there's definitely like something in me that enables me to carry on. So yeah, I do wonder if that's part of the autism. The creativity element, I mean, on so many levels, I've always been so creative. I've had 8 of my own businesses, always been very entrepreneurial. And yes, I sing, and I'm currently the lead singer of a alternative rock band, randomly. And I'm also doing quite a number of different music projects with people. And I'm always the person, again, another positive thing, I'm always the person that's motivated to, come on, when are we going to meet? When are we going to do this? What are we going to do next? How are we going to put that out? I've been a life coach and a business coach for years, and that really fits my autistic profile, I think, because I'm so good at organising things and supporting people to organise themselves and really see there's like again like a very opposite thing. I'm either really, really fine and really straight and really quite serious. I can be really serious and then I'll be in tears the next minute, you know, just I really feel for someone like so deeply, because everything's so extreme. It's like when it comes out and it's positive, and I see feeling for someone really extremely or being really touched by something is a positive, you know, that really enables me to completely feel being a human being and just in touch with nature and people and everything that's happening. And that's incredible, and I really feel very grateful for it. But I'm also doing a one-woman show. I've just suddenly decided I want to write a one-woman show. So I think it's this as well. It just really enables me. When I feel excited about something, I really go for it. I'll just suddenly, like, one day I'll pick it up, and then the next day I'll feel like picking it up again. So yeah, I've started doing that. And also I started my own, because my other business, I work with people with additional barriers to help them into self-employment. I've done this for 11 years, so we do a lot of work in prisons with ex-offenders, long-term unemployed, but we've had all of our funding pulled really recently, but instead of just singing my own self-pity, I've actually decided to start a couple of businesses, you know. I just suddenly, I'm going to start a consciousness coaching business, because as I said before, I'm really spiritual, and I really I do a bit of channeling and a bit of oracle card reading, and people seem to find that, who are into that sort of thing, seem to find that really, really supportive. And because I do life coaching and business coaching as well, I can really offer, it's like a bit of a one-stop shop. So I've already started that up, and that started doing quite well. And I also found, again, a hyper focus. I'm making myself laugh here because it's hilarious when you say it out loud. I met a woman recently who told me about these products. They're called Tropic Skincare, and they're really natural, and they're mainly organic, and they're just like, and I literally thought, because I was a beauty therapist years and years ago, I've always been looking for the best beauty products that have, like, across the range, are really good and natural, and I don't want to use any rubbish and chemicals on my skin. And the minute I met her, she told me about this range, and I was just like, oh my God, I love it. Not only do I love it, like, I want to be an ambassador. I want to be so, like, overnight, I bought a load of the skincare, and I'm an ambassador for Choice Skincare. So I really see that it's really, the hyper focus can be really good. I've also, this is so funny, I don't realize what I'm doing until I actually say it out loud, but I decided one day, because I like taking photographs. I'm not a photographer. I don't want to be a photographer, but I really enjoy taking photographs. And I suddenly decided I'm going to do an exhibition. So I booked an exhibition. So I've got a photographic exhibition in November. But what I love about it is it's going to bring all of these elements that I've talked about together. So, for instance, I've decided to dare, and it's so scary for me to even say this out loud, but I've decided with a lot of the traumas in my life, I'm going to actually take photos that you wouldn't necessarily know represent those traumas, but when you read the piece at the bottom, you'll understand why I've taken a picture of that thing that does represent the trauma. So I just feel it's so important to really share our life experiences and really say who we are and really be vulnerable and really, allow that rawness and allow everything to just come out, allow it to be as it is, just to really expose ourselves in a way for who we truly are. I think on a neurodivergent level, even more so, because, as you say, we're such a small percentage and people feel really alone. A lot of the time I feel really alone because I still don't know a lot about autism or even how to kind of support myself or, so it's just so important, isn't it, to kind of say it all out loud and say it like it is in a way that's actually really profoundly beneficial for others. I really hope it will be anyway.
Wow, thank you. Such a lot to go over there. I've got so many questions. I'm hyper-focusing on your hyper-focusing. Yeah. Just a very quick one. I mean, in terms of you're a life coach, I'm a therapist. I think I just wrote down non-gurus. I think it's really important that people who want to do that kind of work where you're supporting other people. One of my young people who I work with said to me, "We're never finished, are we?" And I thought that was lovely, because no, we're not. And one of the things I teach my therapy students, Benna, is that to make sure that they don't feel like just because you're doing it, that you have to be perfect and have everything resolved in your life and not be vulnerable and not have those days where you feel horrendous, because that's not the real world, and sometimes people think, oh, you're a therapist, you must have it all sussed. You're a life coach, you must know exactly what you're doing all of the time. And that's not reality. So I'm really glad you brought that up, as non-gurus. But a one-woman show, I'm intrigued. Of course you're doing that. absolutely intrigued, but totally not surprised. So tell us a bit more about that, if you don't mind.
Well, hilariously, so I've only just written a very, very rough outline of the first part of it, so I actually can't answer the question because I don't know. I've just kind of jotted a few things around, but it feels like it's really tying into everything I'm doing. So for the photographic exhibition, so I've explained what I'm doing there. And one of the main reasons I'm doing that is because I really want to show people that you can have a shit show of a life, if I'm allowed to say that, and actually come out the other side. I've always felt like one of the main reasons I'm on the planet is to actually really show my vulnerability and really say, listen, you know, you can go through so much, but you really can be okay, and you are okay, and you're perfect as you are. So yeah, I think that really makes a difference. But the One Woman Show, I think it's going to really kind of be in line with that. It's just really openly sharing, I mean, really using my neurodiversity here. I think this is the part of, one of the reasons I feel like I'm doing it is because this is the part of me that actually wants to really show up. And I feel like because I've masked so well throughout, I had no idea how well I'd masked until I got my diagnosis. I've heard this before, apparently people become in quote unquote more autistic after they've had their diagnosis, and I was like, what's that? But I really realized that obviously you're not becoming more autistic, you're just becoming yourself. You're really taking the mask off and really showing yourself for who you are. And I've had, so the great part of that, there's been some really wobbly, not so great moments, but the great part of that has enabled me to really kind of show myself in a way that is quirky and funny and silly, and you know, there's so many elements to myself that I didn't even allow myself to be. So it feels like the One Woman Show is kind of around that, but it's also bringing into perspective sort of everything I've been through, but really trying to bring in an element of fun. It's a trauma, basically. I think this is what I'm trying to do, and I know that might not make much sense to a lot of people, but I really want to show, like, yeah, you can have this hideous thing and you see the funny side. I won't say it today, but I've got a really funny story about my mum that I'm going to incorporate after she died. I mean, some people would just find that absolutely horrific and horrendous, and like, how do you deal with that? But I have to find the funny side, partly to be able to keep my sanity. So yeah, it's going to be a lot about that. I hope that explains vaguely.
It's really good to hear you talking about that. And you know, one thing that a lot of autistic women that I've met doing this podcast has been brilliant, because I've come across so many amazing people of all genders and non-genders. But I find that some of the women I've spoken to are just so brave and just go, I've got this idea. I like the idea. Yeah, I've got 3 notes in my book. I'm going to do it. You know, and I'm a bit like that as well. I'm a bit like, okay, when I started doing hypnotherapy with young autistic people, it wasn't something I'd worked with autistic people in a school in a different capacity. I'd done lots of safeguarding, blah, blah, blah. I was also a therapist. I thought, what if I could put these things together? Do you know what? I've got a few ideas. I'm going to do it. And it's 3 years down the line and it's working really, really well, you know, winning awards, and really proud of that. But it's not about the awards, it's about the benefits for people. And I think sometimes we can, because we're quite black and white, we're a bit like, well, why won't it work? And
yes,
of course, we hyper focus.
exactly.
It's like all you need to do is put your energy and time into something, and then it's done. You know, how can it not work? So I think we can be quite brave and fearless when it comes to just trying these things, and good on you. And I think the One Woman Show sounds amazing. The photography exhibition sounds brilliant as well. I love how you're like, well, I like taking photos. I'm not really a photographer. It's not really my thing, but I decided to do an exhibition. Of course you have. And it'll be amazing as well, because you'll do it brilliantly. So I think that's about it, Ben. I was just going to ask about just the last one, if you don't mind. And I think you've been really entertaining, and I could talk to you for hours, but I know that listeners will be switching off if we just carry on having a chat for hours. You mentioned about being alone, and I know it's something you and I have spoken about previously as well. I spend the majority of my time alone, and it's given me a lot of peace, especially since my diagnosis, and coming to an acceptance about how much time I need to be alone. And I do love people, and I've had some amazing friends in my life, and I've had some brilliant fun and experiences, but I know now why I need that alone time, and I really, really rate it, and I give that to myself. Have you got any comments or anything you'd like to share about spending time by yourself, and also about sort of friendships in general and relationships maybe?
Yeah, sure. So I am actually married. I've been with my husband for 11 years, and we got married a year and a half ago. Actually, that's when I had my accident. And that aside, I really see that I've attracted somebody, very interestingly, who I actually think is neurodivergent as well. He hasn't had the diagnosis, but I'm pretty sure, 99.9% sure he is, which is interesting in itself. But also, I really see that, I really enjoy spending time on my own, and then I know when I need to share with other people. And I do actually I have actually made quite a few friends, but I do have this weird anticipatory fear thing about, like, I don't want too many friends in my life, because the idea is it just really stresses me out that I've got to actually do something about that, and I don't very often think about doing something about that. Like, I have to write notes for everything, so I even include friendships. I have to actually write notes to be in touch with friends, otherwise I have a tendency to not be in touch. And it's not because I don't adore them, I absolutely do. But it's just going back to my husband. It's just really interesting in a situation where I've attracted somebody that works 24/7. So I think one of the reasons I did that is because I really wanted to have that time on my own, sort of subconsciously. So that's been really invaluable, and just I really kind of enjoy spending time on my own. I love, as you say, I feel exactly the same. I feel like I really enjoy being with people. I really do. And then I've just had enough, and I just can't deal with any more. So I have to kind of retreat. And I just think knowing that about yourself is really important, and then giving yourself the time to really, as you say, sort of value and cherish yourself. And then you can kind of come back out again and really value and cherish others.
Yeah, and I don't know if there's something about that hyper-focus tendency, Benna, because I have friends that I've known for years who get really annoyed, not really annoyed, but they get put out, or they feel like I don't care. But time can fly for me, and it can be months have gone by, and all I've done really is walk the dog and do my job and work and spend a bit of time on my own, occasionally see the odd person. And I think, oh my God, I haven't actually paid any attention to any of the people who I really do love and adore, or the majority of them, if they're not directly in front of me. And it makes people feel neglected, or that you don't care. And I apologize to any of my friends who are listening in for that, because I do love them dearly and love spending time with those people. But it's just a case of, it really is a bit out of sight, out of mind. And that's not in a horrible way. Like, when I see them, I hyper focus on them, and I have great time with them. And then when I'm not with them, months can go by, and I think, oh my God, I hadn't thought of, unlike you, and maybe I should write notes and remind myself to contact people. I always thought that was a little bit contrived of me. I thought, oh, if I do that, that's like, is that natural? I mean, is that a natural way to have your phone? But I know that if I don't make notes on everything else in my life, it doesn't happen. So
I think this is the thing with neurodivergence, though. I'm definitely learned this since I've done my training. It's just there's certain things that I just don't have capability to do. So why not write notes? So that is our natural, even though it doesn't necessarily feel natural societally. Of course it wouldn't, because that's not what we've been taught, and the way that we should or shouldn't do something. But when needs must, when you're not going to contact them if you don't write a list, then definitely write a list. I also feel like I do have quite a number, as I said before, of neurodivergent friends in my life. So when I do, as we have, we haven't spoken for ages, and we just picked this up. Like you said earlier, before the call, that we've. It's like we've just spoken to each other yesterday, and I do have that experience with a lot of friends as well, which is actually really lovely.
Yeah, it really is. Now, can't end without just asking you mentioned about your accident, and just to let listeners know, the reason for the phone call into Zoom today is because Benna did have a horrific accident, and it's affected, well, you can't really use computer screens and Wi-Fi and things like that, so you can say whatever you want about that, but I'll leave it over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Just briefly, I mean, it's so I fell off a Segway on my honeymoon. So we got married, even though we've been together 11 years. We got married just over a year and a half ago, and we had 2 days. We just went away for 3 days for our honeymoon at a local hotel. We had 2 days of like gorgeous sunshine, lying by the pool, and the third day was slightly overcast. So my husband, in his infinite wisdom, decided to say, let's do something adventurous. Let's start our married life doing something adventurous. So, cut a long story short, we went to this Segway place nearby in a woods, And yeah, I was doing really well, being really careful. I always read all the instructions, again, very conformist on one level and rebellious on another. But like he was going, come on, let's just get on with it. I was like, no, I've got to read all of the safety instructions. And there was loads of information and they kept reiterating all the safety instructions. And I should have known there was a red flag right there. But anyway, I fell off and I seriously injured myself and I got a head injury and I got whiplash and a few other bits and pieces. But yeah, the head injury is the worst thing because it's been over a year and a half now and I'm still not well, and yes, I just can't be anywhere near Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, anything like that. So it's really affected my business because I just have to do bits and pieces on the computer, do it and then come away and then do it and then come away. But yeah, on so many other different levels it's affected me, but I'm still smiling which is the main thing.
Oh, you're amazing, honestly, and I really appreciate your time and coming on to the podcast. So before we end then, is there anything you want to plug? The Tropic.
Tropic Skincare, yeah. So I have actually set up only very recently a Instagram account for it. So it's called Benna Tropic Beauty. And yeah, feel free to come on and just be in touch basically if you're interested in any of the skincare. So my website link is on there. So they very kindly do that for you. Everything's sort of done for you. And yeah, just be in touch. Benna Tropic Beauty. And my photographic exhibition is going to be in Brighton in a place called the Fishing Quarter Gallery on the seafront, and that's not till November. But just keep an eye out for that.
I might have to come for that. That might coincide with Noah's birthday as well. And last but not least, if people are interested in your music, do you have anything online or YouTube or anything like that they can find you, or on Spotify, for example?
Don't at the moment. I mean, if you put my name in, you'll see stuff that I've done in the past, which I'm very embarrassed about. But no, funnily enough, we've got there was a few videos, really not professional videos, taken of a recent gig that I did, and we are going to start doing pub gigs more in the future. But no, it's going to be more the work that I'm doing with a friend called Max. I'm actually going this afternoon to spend the whole day we've done a new song or a couple of new songs, and we're going to do a video for that. So those things I'll be putting out. I have actually got a song called Calling to the World that if you ask Siri or, Alexa or whatever, that it just comes on. If you say my name, Benna McCartney, Calling to the World, that song's already out there. And I actually did that hilariously, talking about hyperfocus. I literally just suddenly decided one day to go on GarageBand before my head injury. And I have never used GarageBand before. I didn't know absolutely clueless, didn't know what I was doing. I managed to put this track together. And then I said to my husband, wouldn't it be hilarious? Like, I've just done this track. It took me like an hour or something to do the whole track. And I said, wouldn't it be hilarious if we could actually put it out there? It's obviously not good enough quality, so we obviously can't. And he just went, well, I'll just have a look. And we were able to put it on, I think it's Apple and Spotify. So hilariously it went through and it's out there. But this is the other thing I think I'm trying to say. Like, I really, really want to. In my life generally, I really want to support people by just saying, listen, I've just done this random thing. I just think creativity is so important. I've just done this random thing. I'm clueless. I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I'm literally two sheets to the wind, and jack of all trades, master of none. But please, everybody just try and just do something just that makes you feel good and brings out the joy. And there's so much stuff happening in the world and so many people are going through so many hideous things. We really have to find our joy, don't we? And very often that can be in creativity. So just try random stuff. Like, who cares? Just do a photographic exhibition. Singing,
I love it. And I love technology for that, Ben. And so many people, I'm obsessed with watching. One of my special interests at the moment is watching other people hiking and camping on YouTube. I'm absolutely obsessed with it. So people hiking massive trails in America for like months on end, and I watch their stories, and people setting up tents in a hurricane, and I'm just obsessed with that at the moment. But it's just brilliant that people can pick up a camera or pick up a phone and create content. Brilliant that you found, for an hour messing about on GarageBand app. Yeah, and that you create a song and it's out there. I think that's brilliant. And
it's not the best track I've ever done, but
it doesn't matter, does it? I think that's your point.
I'm proud of myself.
Yeah, and I think that's your point, isn't it? It's like, just give it a go. Yeah. And I love it. It's almost like an anti-celebrity thing now, that the average everyday person is able to get out there and be on Spotify, and things like that.
Absolutely. And if I can do it, anybody can.
So my love to Max Moserwave, who I'm sure you were talking about. And
yes.
So you're in a band with him now. So the very last thing to ask you then is, just give us the name of your band.
We haven't decided on one because we've literally just started. We've been working for months together, but we've only just started sort of taking it really seriously and saying we're actually going to put a track out and do a video. So yeah, any ideas, please let me know.
Well, we could pick anything from what you've said today, couldn't we? Who knows? The size 9s, quite like that. That came up today. Listen, have a wonderful day, and I hope that you continue to recover from your accident, and thank you for everything you've shared. You've been amazing, and I'm sure big inspiration to a lot of people listening in. So thank you, Benna.
Thank you so much, Evelyn. It's been so lovely to connect again, and thank you, everybody. It's been an absolute pleasure and an honor.
Thank you for listening. I'm Evelyn Charmer. This is Autistic Voices, and special thanks to our guest of the week.